Okay, I think I'm just going to get started. So we've got a lot of people online already, which is really fantastic to see. Let's get going. First of all, thank you to everybody joining today. We've got, I think now we're looking at 70, ticking over 70 people. People are still trickling in from all over the place, so that's fantastic, and it's great to be speaking to you all. Welcome, and I'm excited to show you what we've been cooking up at Neota Logic. So today is all about show and tell. I want to lift the curtain back a little bit so you can really appreciate the experience of using Neota Logic, making digital tools in Neota Logic. And specifically, I want to show you what our latest product looks like. And that product is Workflow. So Workflow is a tool that we've developed to make it far easier to automate business processes, legal business processes, in a truly no-code way. And that term no code, I'm going to come back to a couple of times throughout the remainder of the session. It's an important idea, and I want to make sure I get into that. But before I do all of that, and before I show you Workflow, I want to take a minute or two just to sort of set the foundations and talk through and understand how we got here. So, why am I sitting here speaking to you about changing and transforming your services, the services that you provide? What got us to that point? Why have you all tuned in to listen to me talk about technology and our technology? And I think the answer to that question, or at least part of that question, lies in a series of paradigm shifts. So I've pulled out three I think are particularly relevant here, some of which have already happened or are already happening, and some of which are still playing out in front of us. So yeah, for the purposes of today, I've got three here. I think there's probably loads more paradigm shifts that have happened in the legal industry and more broadly. And two of these I'm going to cover now, the first two, and one I'm going to save for a little bit later. So this first paradigm shift, analog to digital. So this, I think, will probably make some sense to you already. This is already happening, has already happened in most industries, in almost all industries, and has obviously transformed pretty much every industry going. So, if anything, it's been a long time coming for legal, for things to be digitized. Legal services historically was always an industry that resisted structural change and deep change. If you take a counterpoint of the financial services industry, for example, they weren't so lucky. Think of things like algorithmic trading. It's been going on for 40, 50 years, quantitative trading, that kind of thing. And you can fill your phone's memory with free trading apps, no broker needed. And I think that kind of top to bottom digitization, that hasn't really happened yet in the law. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. And I think one of the core reasons for that is that law is just a very, complicated, knotty, ambiguous thing. And it takes real experience and expertise and empathy actually to know what the best answers are for any given client in any given situation or fact pattern. And it's also a market where the price for falling foul of the rules is really high. So it's always been a service, legal services, which had to be delivered in this analog way. And only a trained expert who knows the law and who knows the circumstances could properly advise you or your company on the right course of action. And you certainly didn't have enough information to do that yourself. But I think now we've moved along this journey on the left-hand side of the screen from analog services to digital services, or we're moving along that journey. And there's plenty of the way to go. We're nowhere near the end of that yet. But even now, legal technology and technology in general is capable of taking on and completing a lot of routine legal work. And in some cases, more than routine legal work, quite complex legal work. That progress, I think, is a really, really great thing from the in-house perspective, of course, because in-house lawyers and professionals face all sorts of business pressures and pressures to be strategic assets within a corporation. But I also want to take a second to mention law firms here, because I also think this is a really, really good thing for law firms. Law firms are dealing with, different challenges, specific challenges, but, a lot of these are quite similar. So, on the one hand, there's this more for less challenge in in-house firms. That is a classic question. And on the legal side, the law firm side, client expectations and client cost pressures are sky high too. The remote work challenge, the distributed work challenge, is a problem for everybody. How do you keep service quality high with a distributed workforce? And then in the law firm space, there's also this disruption challenge. So the market is changing so quickly. ALSPs, legal managed services, digitization by incumbent firms, more in-housing of legal work. There's all sorts of ways that the market is changing too, which is really, really difficult to navigate. And so saying all of this stuff, this is not this is not meant to be a warning for law firms or anything like that. I actually think it's a huge blessing in disguise for law firms, because it's law firms who have the relationships with business. It's law firms who have carefully built reputations over, on the back of consistently great work for years and decades. And it's therefore also law firms who I think would benefit most from digitization, because you already have the market demand. They just need to give the clients, the customers, what they're asking for. I think what they're asking for is digital services that run and can be accessed 24/7, any time of the day, operate at far lower cost, capture data automatically, save the firm time and money, which can be passed on to those clients. And I think separately, it can also open up new revenue opportunities too, because, and this is actually one of the things that our law firm customers have realized. So Clifford Chance, Allen & Overy, a number of different law firms, there's a little more power. There's not very much more powerful than a law firm's reputation and a law firm's track record in the market, because trust is not easily won in the legal industry. And if you already have it, you have a huge advantage in the market. And if you can combine that trust and that pedigree with really good, really judicious use of technology in a firm, you can become, well, law firms can become some of the biggest winners in the legal landscape. Little diversion on law firms there, but zooming back out, that's what Neota Logic is all about. It's all about transforming analog legal services into digital legal services. So that's shift number one. But I already said, we already know this is happening. It's been going on for years. Every industry is touched by this. So here's, I think, where we come to paradigm shift number two. So programming to no code. So we all know that the legal industry needs to change, and there are change pressures, and we need to make sure that we're doing a better job and delivering better services. But it's almost as if, who can afford to do it, because it's still been prohibitively expensive and really complicated and exhausting to transform services to digital, because you've got to hire and manage these enormous teams of programmers, and projects can take 12, 18 months more to deliver. And it's really hard to engage the business stakeholders, because they just, at the end of the day, they just can't engage with the technical detail. I couldn't engage with the technical detail. It's the language that lawyers and business people don't speak. So it's really, really difficult to deliver those kinds of projects, whether that be in the law firm context or in the in-house legal context. So I think that's the second paradigm shift here, from having a team of programmers building digital tools to just building them yourself, which is the no-code way. So from software development to no-code development. And I think in the same way that people talk about software eating the world in the past decade, I think no-code development is eating traditional software development. So what does it mean? So no-code, all that means really is that the digital tools that you build with don't require you to know how to code. It's all drag and drop, boxes and arrows, which means basically that you can build software, functioning software, in a matter of minutes and hours instead of weeks and months and years. So it means, for example, if your time is being demanded from every corner of the business, then you can quickly put together a solution, a digital solution to deal with it. So, if you are trying to work out which outside counsel to use, and you have to make that decision 10 times a week or whatever it might be, you can put together a quick recommendation tool using your own business policies and business logic. Or if you're sick of reviewing NDAs, as I was in in-house for a little while as a practicing lawyer. And if you are sick of doing NDAs all day, you can build an NDA workflow to generate and negotiate and sign the NDAs. So that's the second shift. And I think that's really where Neota Logic lives. Neota Logic is a no-code intelligent automation platform. And what it automates is expertise, documents, and processes. That means anything really, from automating your advice to your contracts and other documents to entire business processes built with your own hands. And today in the workflow demo, we're going to be focusing on this process automation piece. We've been doing it for a very long time. Since 2010, Neota Logic has been around. We've got really, really deep experience working with in-house legal teams and and law firms. And we're a company essentially full of lawyers and ex-lawyers. So I spent some time in private practice and in-house before I ended up on the technology side. Okay, so look, it's about time I show you what this all looks like. So I'm going to dive into the Neota logic environment now and then go through that entire process of building a business workflow without code. We have quite a mixed audience today, so I'm hoping I'll have time to go through at least, well, a couple of different examples, at least two. And I want to start with a really interesting little use case that actually came out of some of our community discussions a few weeks ago. So we were talking about offices and managing returns to work. And someone from the law firm persona side said that they were having loads of headaches around managing an increase in external visitors to the office. So not employees, but external visitors. So, you know, third parties, contractors, support staff. And it was actually quite laborious to manage their visits and to make sure that they had appropriate safety plans in place and were agreeing to wear appropriate safety gear. So we talked about building a quick tool that would give those third parties essentially a digital affidavit that they would sign, which would say that they were, you know, had prescribed to the right policies and they were safe to work in the office. And there's a few different stages in that use case, some quite interesting complexities. So we're going to make that app on the screen. So just switching over now to a screen, which is the Neota Logic workbench environment. This is like mission control for your applications. And you can see it looks a little different. You can see these sort of cards on the screen. And each card has got a different name. These are all different use cases, different proof of concept applications, demos that, you know, I've made. This is my private environment. So these are all just little examples of apps that I've made to show different functionalities. And so you can see here, contract management templates, a quick contract management tool that I put together, an NDA tool with a couple of signatures, a negotiation tool there as well. And if you look at the top of the screen, there's a few different tabs there: products, applications, library, and canvas. So we won't really go into all of these now, except to say that we'll come back to library and canvas a little bit later. It will become relevant a little bit later. But for now, we're just going to stick to this tab right here, which is called products, because this is where we actually create workflows. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new workflow. Yeah. So I click just here, and I'm just going to put in some basic information. Just going to call it something like COVID affidavit application. But you can change the names anytime. You can, you know, make them, put a different naming a system in place, connecting it to a database. I'm just going to add a quick logo as well, just to make it look a little bit nicer on the screen, so I can refer to it and I know where it is. If I have lots and lots of different tools and products in my Neota environment, I can navigate to it quickly. And here is my brand new workflow. So I'm just going to jump in now to the edit environment. So you can see here, there's a few new elements straight off the bat. So you can see a swim lane in the center of the screen with a start node. So this is obviously where we're going to start our process. It will look quite similar to a process mapping tool, you know, a lucid chart or a BPMN tool of a different kind. Neota's workflow is built to kind of map and be very similar to BPMN tools with the added power of having real software at the end of it. If we look to the left of the screen, it may just be slightly hidden off screen, but there's a toolbar where we can drag in new elements to the workflow. So things like reminders and emails. If I wanted to drop those in, I can drop them in directly from there. And a few different kinds of task nodes, which, you know, we'll go into some of these. We won't go into some of these because we won't have time to do the full thing. So that's where we would use put tools in, very similar to a BPMN tool. And then on the other side of the screen, we have a smaller toolbar, which is sort of where we can press play and run the application, where we can do things like undo and redo. So if you've made changes or you've made mistakes in the application, you can go back and forward to check your changes. Ask for help, so you can get connected up to our support site. You can switch to night mode as well. if you're working late at night and the white light is getting annoying, then we've just built a night mode function as well for those red eye lawyers. And you can also, there's another element here called whiteboard mode, which I won't go into right now, but we will come back to because that's quite a powerful functionality. So back to the workflow, the swim lane in the middle, what we're actually going to be building on today, this COVID affidavit application use case. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to name my pool and my swim lane. So I know who the persona is, who's doing the work here. So let's say the pool is my organization, Neota, and the swim lane is, we'll call them the initiator of the request, so just initiator. And then what I want to do is from my start node, I want to create a new application. So I want to build my first task in the application, in the workflow, which is just going to contain a questionnaire for the user. So this is just going to send a request for it to a third party to fill in their affidavit. The powerful thing here is that I don't have to build a fully fledged application here. I can just create a placeholder, and then I can worry about filling in the content of that application later. This means that I can just do my mapping. I can get all of my swim lanes in place, all of my my flow in place, understand the big picture without getting distracted in complexities and getting bogged down in any detail, little details. Exactly what questions I'm going to ask, what font do I want the questions to be in, where do I want them to sit, all of that stuff. We can leave it to the side. We can just focus on the big picture for now. So that's step one, is creating a task, which is an application that you would make later in Neota. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to create an email. So this is the next phase of this particular use case, is I want to put together an email that's going to get sent out from the initiator, that's going to move the workflow along to the next persona in the workflow. So I'm going to call this one, approval needed from approver, or email to approver. And again, I can leave the content of that email blank, but I can also go in and I can edit it as well. So I can edit the text of that email, and I can make it a customized, fully customized email. But I just don't want to do that right now because I'm focusing on my mapping. So yeah, we'll come back to that a little later on. So at this stage here, a new persona is about to enter the workflow. So I'm going to create a new swim lane, and this is going to be the swim lane for the approver of the request. So we can name it something like approver. Just going to swing it over. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new task for that approver. So I'm going to connect up from the email I sent to the approver, a brand new task, move it into the swim lane where the approver's work is done, and then just make another placeholder application, not worrying about the content, not worrying about the questionnaires, the look and the feel. All of that is going to come a little bit later on. So that's kind of our first few steps of this particular workflow. Now, after this stage, I want different things to happen depending on whether this request gets approved or not. So, if the request isn't getting approved, I want to send an email back to the initiator saying, sorry, your request wasn't approved. Speak to me if you've got any issues, or this is the reason why it wasn't approved. And if it does get approved, then I want the counterparty to come into the workflow and review the document and sign the document and get moving throughout the workflow. So in order to achieve that, I just created a gateway. And a gateway means that you can have multiple routes out from a particular place in the workflow. Again, quite similar to the BPMN approach. I'm just going to call it something like approved. And then from this gateway, at this stage, I want two paths. So one path is going to be the path of rejection. So this is the path where I have, as the reviewer, I have looked at the request and I've said, no, this isn't necessary. So I'm going to create an email here for the initiator, and I'm just going to let them know that the request hasn't been approved. But for now, again, I'm just going to change the label, but I'm not going to worry too much about the text, the content of the email. We'll come back to that. So that's just letting the initiator of the request know we're not going to approve this request. And then I'm going to just add one extra element to the end of this this route, which is something called an end node. So you have end nodes to kind of tell the system this is a dead end. Things have changed here. End nodes are really powerful because they have another function, which is to tell the system exactly for what reasons the system ended. So because you're going to have multiple end nodes throughout the workflow, when you go back to monitor and understand how these work streams are progressing, you can see why they failed or why they ended. What is the reason why this work stream didn't progress? Well, it's because it wasn't approved, and we know that because there's data pulled from that end node put into our in our database. So path 2, this is the path of approval. So here I want to create an email for the counterparty in the same way that I created an email for the initiator. But this time I'm just going to invite them in and say, we would like, before you arrive at the office, please fill in this affidavit, please answer these questions. And that's going to move us into a further stage of the workflow. So now I've got these two swim lanes within a pool. I actually want to create another pool. I want to create an entirely different pool because the next persona in this workflow is external to the organization, Neota Logic. It's a third party. So if I create another pool here, and I can just make it sort of the same size and stuff like that, it will snap to the right sizes. But I can call this third party or counterparty or contractor or whatever the persona might be in your own individual scenario. But you can name it, if you want to have more than one persona in that second organization, you can, a signatory and a reviewer or whatever else you want to do. It's very, very flexible in that way. So I want to just connect these two pools up, and I do that by creating an app, and I move it down into the pool, the counterparty pool. You can see the line sort of went dotted there. That's because the system knows exactly where the application is sitting. So as soon as it moves into that swim lane, the system knows, okay, this is a counterparty application. It's got specific functionality and specific information around it that lets the system know it's on the other side of the fence. So again, I'm just going to make a placeholder application. This is where we would sort of jump in and review that document. So I'm just going to pause here actually and just to review what we've done. So what we've done is we have started building a workflow in Neota Logic workflow. It's a kind of BPMN style, whiteboard style building tool, and there are nodes and there are arrows and there are boxes and there are swim lanes and pools. And the slight difference here is that each of these nodes, rectangular nodes, is in itself an application and has its own depth of functionality. I also created a few emails which are delivered to other people. I created a logical gate which controls my passage through that workflow. So that's what I've done. And if I wanted to run the app now, you can see that button in the corner, the play button is turning up red. I can't play it. So this is where that whiteboard functionality comes in that I mentioned earlier. So if I press this button here, the whiteboard button, you can see a whole lot of red and orange has started appearing on the screen, which is telling me, why I don't have a ready-made workflow yet. These are all the issues that I've got to fix. Appreciate it's a little bit, probably a little bit hard to see, quite small text, but it's just saying things like, there's no email text defined yet. There's no application behind the placeholder, that kind of thing. So that's how I know that I'm not fully finished this task yet. But that's fine. I can assign applications from a set of applications that I already have here. So I could just find applications that exist and assign them to those placeholders. So I have real apps in there. And I can fill in all of that email text, and I can do all of that work as well. But with whiteboard mode, I actually don't need to do that straight away. Even now, I can really just focus on finishing the entire workflow. Whiteboard mode hides all of that red and orange. You don't have to worry about errors and things that need to be fixed. You just have a whiteboard that you can free create in. So I'm actually just going to speed through the rest of the workflow build so you can see how it's actually comes together in the end. So, here you can see I'm creating another gateway. Some more task nodes are being created. Again, just placeholder tasks. I'm creating an email there that's just going to connect up, go back to the initiator, and then another couple of tasks as well, and then an end node, so I know why the system has come to an end. And this later piece, this sort of latter piece that we just did a speed run through, that's the kind of signing workflow. That's the counterparty has received the affidavit. They're happy to sign it. They're going to sign it via DocuSign, and they're going to send it back to the initiator to sign too. So that's that workflow. Okay, so I've now finished my workflow. I finished my process map, and I've drawn this full kind of process out to map it out. And as of now, I can now take this, go away, and help other stakeholders understand what I want to achieve with this particular tool. This is enough. There's enough information here for you to be able to get the point across quite well. But I do need to populate this workflow with some real applications, real questionnaires, real functionality. So this is where I move into another tool in the Neota platform. Neota is, it's not a tool, it's a set of tools, and they all work together in an environment. That means that you can build really powerful things by using those different tools in unison. So we're back now at this workbench area where we started in the beginning. And if you remember right at the beginning of the demo of workflow, I showed you these different tabs at the top. We're now going to go into this tab here, the Canvas tab, which is our rapid prototyping tool. So that's where we create applications really quickly. And those applications can contain questionnaires, they can contain reasoning, they can contain documents or messages. Some really clever logic can be contained in those applications too. Because if you remember at the beginning of the workflow, there was that rectangular task node. Well, that's where the initiator started the workflow. I'm going to go ahead and create that application in Canvas right now. So you can see how I flesh out that process map and add some depth to that process map using Canvas. So I'm just going to name it something, again, just quite generic. So I know it's in this affidavit workflow. I know it's the first application, just a little bit of signposting in the name. And then we're just going to open up a Canvas here. So as you can see, the general look and feel of Canvas is pretty similar to workflow. But some of the tools available are a little bit different. So down the left-hand side of the screen, you can see there's a slightly different toolbar of tools. There's something, there's emails down here. There's a few other bits and pieces. So at the top, there's ask nodes. Ask nodes are if we want to create a questionnaire, intake some information from the user, create a really quick form and questionnaire. You can use an ask node. Formula nodes, so formula nodes and rule nodes actually are sort of in one bracket. A formula node if you want to build some logic or some calculations. So you can see with the formula node, if I jump into this formula node, we can carry out a bunch of different calculations. If we're dealing with numbers, there's lots of different things that you can do if you calculate using mathematical formula. And that's sort of one side of reasoning, which is available in Canvas. And then there's also rule nodes. So rule nodes are, more a different kind of reasoning tool. So you can create loads of different kinds of outputs, text, dates, times, yes, no answers, numbers, etc. And you can use this expression editor to build logical rules. So legal rules, logical rules, whatever it might be, you can use this editor to create that logic into the system, into the rule node. So those are the kind of two different the reasoning tools there. And then there's a few different output tools as well. So message nodes are the first one. So message nodes are things you display on the screen. Document nodes are, as it sounds, you can create Word or PDF documents directly in Canvas. So I can create text outputs, document outputs very easily. Email nodes, if I want to send emails from within the application, I can do that too to specific senders. I can add the documents as attachments. So yeah, a few different ways that you can start building out the functionality in Canvas. So I'm just going to get rid of these. I'm not going to use all of these tools straight away. I'm probably just going to keep it quite simple for this Canvas application. I don't need to do too much. So what we're actually going to do to start is we're going to create a welcome page. We're just going to start back from the start node. I'm going to name it something like just welcome page, and I'm going to keep this up really, really simple. I'm going to just add a header. I'm going to add very, very minimal explanatory information into the application just so I know what it's doing. I can always come back to it at any point to add gloss and add text and add information to it, but just enough so that I can progress the workflow, get the whole thing done while I've got the idea in my mind. So just going to call it, add intake form, and I'm just going to delete this paragraph section just for the sake of simplicity. You can also change the look and feel of the apps quickly here as well. So I can use one of our house themes. So I'm going to, you can use Berlin, which has got a bit of a modernist kind of theme, or a bit more black and white, a bit more brutal. Or I can go, we have a bunch of different house themes. Santorini is another one that we have, which is a bit more exotic and tropical. I'm just going to stick with Wellington because that is the sort of most middle of the road style that we have, and I quite like using that one. But you can create as many custom themes as you want in Neota. This is another piece of the Neota platform, is this theme editor. Create bespoke, customized themes that the apps can look essentially however you want them to look. Okay, so the next stage is the questions. So I just want to collect some basic information about the personas in this workflow, really. I want to understand who the initiator is and what their contact information is. I want to understand who the counterparty is and how I get in contact with them. I want to understand who the approver is. So I'm going to take this ask node, and then I'm going to quickly build a form, a question form to collect that information that I want from the user. So I'm just adding a couple of, well, I'm going to add a header here just to signpost that this is a section about the counterparty, and then I can create other subheaders in the form for different sections, for the approver, for the initiator, whatever it might be. I can write in the question text here. I can choose the kind of, question that I want to ask as well. So if I want to collect the counterparty name here. Now that, obviously is a text question. That's something that I want to just collect a text answer to. So if I open up question settings, I can just make sure it's a text question, which it is. So it could be many different kinds of question. I could call it the date question, number question. There's loads of different ways that the question could be presented. It could be formulated. But for now, we just want a text question. I can add in validation, so the answer must be provided before proceeding. I can add conditional logic, so the question only appears if I create a condition in this expression editor, which means that you can have follow-up questioning built really, really easily. So there's a number of different ways that you can mess around with the way that the question appears already in Canvas. I'm also just going to give the question a name as well. The reason I do this is so I can find the question later. If I was to build a more powerful, more complex app in Canvas, then I might want to use the information collected earlier later on in that flow. And if I've given each question a name, I can more easily pull them out, more easily grab that data and make it useful later on in the workflow. So that's why we give questions names in that way. So again, I'm just going to speed this up a little bit, so we can just skim through, because you get the message of how Canvas is used to build applications. So here I'm just creating the remainder of the questions in the flow in much the same way, fleshing out the remainder of that intake form. So yeah, some information about the initiator here I want to add, some information I want to collect about the approver. This is all actually information I could collect, from single sign-on, for example, or from a connection to an internal database. So yeah, so I'm also just going to have a question here at the end, which is just the initiator can provide a bit of explanation, and then I'm going to create a really simple conclusion page using a message node, just to say, thank you for using the tool. And as you can see, I've used an inline value, so I can sort of drag information from earlier. That's why I gave those questions names, so I can drag that information and use them as inline values in messages and documents and emails and other things like that. So yeah, I mean, Neota is really powerful in that way that you can use the data in other places. It becomes even more powerful when you use the data across the whole workflow. So in the 7th or 10th app in the system, you can still use the question names, the questions that you built in app 1 in those other tools in the workflow. Okay, so I'm now going to press this play button in the corner in Canvas and just check what it looks like. And this is the great thing about Canvas. If I press play right now, I actually have a functioning piece of software. I have a functioning application built in the space of, that probably took 20 minutes or so in real life, 20 to 25 minutes. It's pretty bare bones, obviously, it's not very much to look at, but it works perfectly. So if I, were to fill in this page with a bit of dummy information, and I can fill in the application, I can run through and just check the logic is firing correctly. Just make sure that it runs through in the right order. So yeah, I'll just use, Neota Logic Limited as an example. I'll just say that I'm the counterparty contact. I'll just use my email address. And yeah, just I'm going to skip the rest. Just to show you what happens next. You can see, you know, I've just got that message page with those values pulled through it. And I could spend, you know, another half an hour making it look pretty. You know, I could add, you know, some complexity. I could, you know, just clean it up a little bit. That's where actually another tool in the Neota toolbox comes in, and a tool called Studio, which is a much more powerful, more complex app building environment. So Canvas is for those prototyping sort of tools. Studio is for really heavy grade enterprise tools, and they really are designed to work together. Use Canvas to do your prototype, and then if you want to add bells and whistles and more power, go to Studio. Studio it can make things look a lot better. So I'm going to switch back over to the workflow tool. So the first tool that we began in, and I'll just do the same thing for any other part of the workflow that contains an application. So, you know, I've just created that application for this first box here. And now I could do that same thing for every box, create different Canvas applications throughout the workflow to start adding flesh and depth to the application. So wherever I need a quick app, I build it in Canvas. I may or may not clean it up a little bit in our Studio tool, you know, depending on how much time I've got. And then I plug those applications into the workflow to add that depth. So once I've done that, I can really start to harness the power of workflow. So I can link the data in these applications, all of these applications that I've created, will have created in this workflow, into a single unified layer, because all of the data fields in all of the apps are collected together. And then I can use that data from one place into a wholly different part of the workflow. So, you know, for example, if I've collected, so if I go to data here, you can see I've got every single data point collected, you know, automatically from every application that is in this workflow. And I can use those wherever I need them. And that data is always available in the system. So yeah, if I now go to these email nodes throughout the workflow, so I can dive into these email nodes, and I can start adding in a bit of context. So you can see here what I did was I added in some inline values, that approver email that I collected from the first application. I've just dropped that in there. I've added a subject line, some body text, and then just to, you know, you can customize this as much as you want, but you can do, you know, quite a lot there. And then you can see there's this button here called Workflow Resume URL. So this is quite powerful. We call it like a magic link, because it essentially lets the next persona who receives this email enter the right stage of the workflow automatically. So it's a workflow in motion, and there is no messy connection, no data operation, no syncing, nothing complicated. You literally just click the URL and you're in. It's that simple to move through the workflow. Okay, so I think it's about time that we saw this finished product in action. So I'm going to switch now to show you what this looks like at the runtime once I've done a little bit of cleaning on it. So I'm just going to go to this, head to this play button in the corner and just press play and just see what I've built here. So you can see, here's that intake form that I created in Canvas. So for the purposes of this, I did clean it up a little bit. You know, I added some dividers in, you know, I moved the questions around on the page a little bit, but substantively, it is pretty much exactly the same as that application that I made in Canvas. I've put in some default dummy answers in here too, so you can see there's some counterparty information, a reason for the request, again, just some filler text, but I've added that in just for the sake of clarity. And I'm just going to open my email inbox now alongside, so you can see how this workflow works in motion. Yeah, please ignore the puppy and the pumpkin. That's all done automatically by my email tool. But if I run through now this first stage of the application, you can see I've got that message page which says thank you, and you know, an email has been sent. But now if you see on the right hand side of the page, an email has just come into my inbox, which has been sent by the system. So that shoots in the inbox of the approver, the next person in the workflow, and I can go into that message. I can click on that magic link that I mentioned. So you can see there's that magic link at the bottom. And if I click on that, I'm into the next stage of the workflow automatically. No funny data connection issues, no messy work to be done, just straight in as the approver. And it's a unique link to that approver. So I've just created another really simple application here, just showing some data from earlier, so that request information, just pulling that information from earlier, and then a really simple approval, a yes/no response. Is it the request valid and necessary? You can add obviously much more complexity if you want to. And then if I were to click submit here, this would shoot an email into the inbox of the counterparty if we did approve it, or into the inbox of the initiator if we didn't approve it. So I'm just going to pause there and show you something else that's quite powerful too. So if I go back to this workbench area, you can see there's a few different kinds of buttons at the bottom here. And rather than going into the editing space, I'm actually going to click on that sessions button, because this is where all of that structured data is held and surfaced for use. So this is a really powerful piece of the Neota logic picture. This is data management, because every data field in every app, in every workflow, is automatically structured, automatically collected by the system, and it's fed into this table. So you can instantly and very easily track each of the runs of the application and have oversight capability. So for example, you can see in this first column, it's the automatically generated status report telling me at what stage in the workflow I am. So I can see, counterparty review. I'm waiting for the counterparty to review it. They haven't started it yet. So I know where I am. And if I look up some of the other sessions, you can see different statuses. This one has ended. The agreement's actually been signed. This one hasn't even started yet. Some of them have also got my name in them as well, because if it's used internally within the business, you know who's been in the application and been doing the work. So you can check in with those people directly, which makes that kind of monitoring so much easier. I can also jump back into a stage of the workflow using buttons. So I can use this resume button, which can be customized so that they only appear to specific people. If you're an admin user, maybe you're the only you're the only person who gets to see the resume button. But that means that you can jump into the application at different points. You can collect pertinent information and show it. So if I just want to see the request description, I can use this tool up there to show the right information. And you'll see this last column. It's mostly empty, but there's a document in there. That's where those fully signed affidavits will sit once I've gone through the entire workflow. So the last thing to show here is if I click on this little button at the start of each row, I can actually access an audit history of each particular run of the application. So I can see exactly when we progressed through each stage of the workflow. So you can see every stage I went through. I've got a timestamp. I know who it was done by. It's really granular audit capability. So you can really monitor and really understand what's going on with the particular workflow. I can also manage reminders as well. If I wanted to create scheduled reminders, I can do that too. So back to that latest email. So I, as the counterparty, have now been invited in to review. And when I click in, I can confirm, signatory details. I can just, say that's my name. Yeah, that's the signatory's email. And then answer to some basic questions that I created about compliance with safety plans. So these are just some really simple questions, just tick some boxes around safety compliance. So just pausing here and reminding ourselves what is actually happening here. We built a logical gateway into this workflow to ensure that signing is only taking place if the approval threshold is met. So, I want to quickly show how I would go about building that logic in Canvas. So we're going to jump back to Canvas and to show you what that looks like. So here is Canvas again, and here is this logic editor, logic expression editor. And you can see those three questions that I just showed you on the screen previous. I created some logic here to map those questions and make sure I go down the right path in the gateway. So if the answer to any of those questions is no, then I don't get an approval. And conversely, if the answer to those three questions is yes, and I've used AND logic here, slightly different. If the answer to those all three questions are yes, then it is approved, and we can get that affidavit signed. So that's just how you go about creating logic in Canvas. And yeah, again, I can just jump into Canvas, check the logic works, check it makes sense really easily, really quickly, by just running through the application in that way. Okay, so just gonna swing back to the workflow environment again. So back in workflow, I can actually go back to this counterparty review page. And so what's happening here now is I went through that application in the workflow, that approval application, and I went through and I said that, yes, this is approved. You can go through and sign the affidavit. So this is just a dummy affidavit, but we've linked this application directly, integrated it directly into DocuSign, which you can do in workflows. So this has now sent the counterparty into DocuSign. So they're looking at this affidavit now that they've been approved to sign. They can skip down to the bottom and they can actually sign that affidavit there and then to make sure, to get the affidavit signed. And if you remember the workflow, there was a section where it goes now back to the initiator so they can countersign the affidavit, and then that will conclude our workflow. So we're just going to finish this, go through to the end of this particular workflow. I now, as the initiator, I'm just going to review the affidavit, go down, check the signatures there, it is, and then countersign it, which completes the whole workflow that we built so far, and shows me that signed document. So that's the end of the workflow as it currently stands. But that's really the most powerful thing about workflow, is that it doesn't have to end here. So this is where I come back to those paradigm shifts. And this is that third paradigm shift that I'm talking about, point solutions to platforms. Because you're using a platform, you can actually keep adding to it. You can keep building, you can keep going. So you can integrate with a storage mechanism, for example, like Google Drive or a SharePoint, or you can connect with a machine learning extraction tool, something like, Akira or Illuminance or whatever it might be. But because Neota Logic is a platform, you can keep building and keep expanding and automate more and more of the pain points of the business, more and more of a particular process away from the same place. So that's that third big idea. So yeah, services are changing from analog to digital, yes. And yes, there is a burgeoning no-code movement, which is where Neota Logic really shines. But there's also a shift away, I think, from this the kind of short-termist, point-to-point, problem-to-problem mindset. So why is that shift important? I'm talking about platforms. Do you necessarily want platforms? Isn't it, easier to use point solutions? I think historically, yes, point solutions can often be quick wins, and they exist to deliver on, a specific need, which is great. You can get them up and running really fast. There's that immediate gratification and satisfaction. I had a problem, I got the solution in, done. It's cost effective in the beginning. I don't think it's cost effective in the long run, but when you take them alone, it's cost effective. But now I think, thanks to this no-code shift, platforms are way, way easier and way more intuitive to use than they've actually ever been. So it suddenly becomes possible for business users, non-technical people, lawyers, to be tech-enabled by these user-friendly tools. So suddenly it becomes the better option, far better option, and far more cost-effective option to use a platform, because a platform can serve a number of needs. It means a team can build their own solutions. It means you can be proactive and you can build solutions for future problems. It means you can scale things up and you can start small and you can build really, really powerful solutions. And I think essentially the big power of platforms is it lets that business, the whole business, transition to a longer term mindset, a longer term approach, and it gives you the tools to solve, a whole range of problems quicker and at lower cost. We had our global user group last week, and my colleague Nancy used this great analogy in her presentation, in that point solutions are like fish, and you have more than one need, so you buy more than one fish, and eventually you have so many needs, you have a barrel of fish. But the fish aren't all swimming in the same direction. One fish doesn't integrate easily with the other fish, and one doesn't share its data. It can cause headaches and inefficiencies. So that was a quick, top to bottom journey, I think, through the making of a no-code workflow in Neota Logic. And also a run through of these three kind of important paradigm shifts that are really, really key to think about when you're thinking about the change in the legal industry and legal services. We've got a little bit of time left, and I do actually want to make sure I've got a little bit of time for questions. But I did promise something more in-house specific or another use case. So I want to show you one more workflow, or at least part of one more workflow, just so we can sort of round it out. And this one's quite an interesting one. It's a legal services request portal. So, a really common pain point for in-house legal teams. But this one's really interesting because it's actually an oven-ready template. So any customer of Neota can actually just have the app that we're about to show instant access. They can just, it's available in that library tab that I showed you earlier. Neota's got a library of loads of templates, and for particular, common pain points, this is just one of them. So that's what I want to show you now, is this legal services request tool, and just quickly show you how it's made. So I'm going to go back to the workbench. I'm going to open up that tool in the workflow editor. You can see this is a slightly different workflow. Yeah, I'll just zoom out so you can see the whole picture, but not make it too small. But yeah, look, from a quick view, you can see there's these two entities. There's a pool at the top and a pool at the bottom, and a total of 4 personas. So, you know, there's 3 personas in the first pool. There's 1 persona down at in the second pool. There's a few emails flying about in here. There's a few logical gates. Yeah, as a side note, by the way, that's one of the other important benefits of using a tool like Workflow to build, because if you were trying to do this in a decision tree style tool, a pure decision tree style tool, what you will find is that you'll run into what we call the spaghetti problem, because as you want to build a more refined solution, decision trees can actually become extraordinarily complicated and extraordinarily hard to follow. They become way too big to manage. Whereas if you look at it as a process map, it's a far more concise way of displaying lots of information, because each node here contains a depth of information, you know, an entire application complete with questionnaires, with logic, whatever else. So yeah, so let's zoom in here a little bit. So we've got a questionnaire up here, which will intake some information about the legal request from the persona. This is just going to be the business requester persona. So just again, you can customize each of these stages if you wanted to implement this into your own organization. Then there's this email that goes out to the legal department assigner. So that email is going to get sent to the assigner. They're going to jump into another application, and in that application, they're going to review the request for work, and they're going to assign that piece of work to, you know, whatever route that the system and the legal team decide. So here you can see there's a couple of different gateways. First, there's this legal request. You know, is that approved or rejected? If rejected, I go down the path of rejection, and I get an email back and say, sorry, we're not, you know, you can't do that for you. Or there's a path of approval that goes on to another gate, which is a 3-way gate. So this gate, you know, either routes me to the legal department, which will take me to another app. And the legal team can actually assign some work and get that work done. Or it can go to outside counsel. So, you know, the system could even recommend you outside counsel, but it goes down to this swim lane here. Or it can go to self-help. So you can tell the system you want a self-help tool. So let me show you what this actually looks like in practice at runtime. So here's the first screen of the application, and you can see it's already a little bit different because there's this blue instruction box on the screen. This is just so to help anyone who wants to implement this tool into the business quickly. So, you know, you can see here, step 1, step 2, step 3. There's an instructional video in there. There's just some information about how to get this thing implemented into the business. There's a pop-up link to the workflow there too. Some other notes and other bits of information too. So yeah, I'll just click on that pop-up. You can see we've just lumped in the entire map so people can understand what the tool looks like from the editor perspective. And then just some other sort of explanatory text at the bottom, which just basically says, here's what the app does and here's how it's going to work. So if I now click through this application, just going to click through here. Sorry, just to skip back here. If I click through, the system is just going to collect some information about the request. So it can automatically pull certain information. It can, you know, ask you what date do you need it by. So if you want to have some automatic prioritization, if you let them know I need this within 3 days, then that can be taken into account in the system. Some information about the request, you know, what area of legal is this relevant to, add some extra information. Are there any special issues involved? You can upload files, you know, evidence files or information files as well. But essentially, it's just an intake form. So you can just pull that information directly in, and that can be shown to the legal team so that they have everything they need to work with when they're going to go about assigning this piece of work. So, so if I click through here, so because I told the system it was an employment issue, it's actually showing me a page with employment-specific questions on it. Who's the person involved? Who's the supervisor? Then I can review my inputs. You know, so each questionnaire can be totally dependent on what kind of work it's relevant to. So, you know, it's employment, therefore it's a whole other questionnaire to what would be showing if it was a tax issue or a finance issue, or whatever else. So that can be customized really deeply. You can have loads of different branching workflows in there to make sure that the right questions appear to the right people. Then what I can do is I can just review my inputs before sending it through to the legal department. and then I can add any additional notes I want to add as well. I'm actually just going to bring up my email inbox again here. And I just want to show you what happens when I click through this application and go through to the next stage of the application. So I realize I'm close to time here, so I'm just going to wrap this use case up fairly quickly and then jump to the questions as well. But you can see that I've completed that stage. I've got an email into my inbox there. So I've received that request essentially as the legal team. I've received this request for work, so I can click into that. This is just a simple request, simple approval application. There's that magic link again, different magic link, unique magic link every time. And if I jump into that, you can see that the application which is produced is just a simple approval application. So it shows the information that I've given already, and it just says yes, no, is this approved? Again, you can make this far more powerful if you wanted to, far more complex. So now here, after this stage is where that, also if you can have conditional questioning. So if the request isn't approved, you can add reasons so that the initiator knows why they didn't get the help that they needed. But if I click yes and go through, this is where that three-way logic gate comes into play. So yeah, here's where I could upload, I could go in three different directions. I could go into outside counsel, and I could, upload my whole list of outside counsel in here, and I could use Neota's logical power to make a recommendation of which firm to use. So to show you what that looks like. So yeah, I could, it's just some dummy firms here, but I could fill this in with my own set of firms, and I could add logic to give recommendations as well. I could also go back and I could go down the legal team route, and I can assign the work to a particular member of the legal team, or I could go down the self-help route. So I could go down the route where I actually tell the business user to deal with it themselves, basically. This is really powerful, and this is really the last point, I think. This is really another power of the platform model, is that you can create a whole range of different self-service tools in Neota as well and connect them to the workflow. So if this person wanted an NDA, rather than getting the outside counsel to do it for you or getting your legal team to do it for you, send them the app, send them the NDA application, and they can do it themselves. Same thing with litigation advisor, same thing with the trademark and copyright advisor. But you can build a whole suite of self-service tools for the business in its legal services request portal to make sure that as much of the work is taken away and automated as possible. Okay, look, I'm gonna wrap up there because I think we just run slightly over time here. So that's the real picture. That's what Neota is all about. It's about taking a platform approach, and it's a no-code tool that means that you can make that transition to digital from analog services far easier, far more cost-effectively. Thank you. So I'm just going to pause and just see if we've got any questions. I see we've got a couple of questions that have come through. So Jose has asked, is the recording going to be available? Absolutely. So I can make sure that you get a recording of the session. If you want to use that internally, no problem at all. Jose also asked about languages. Great question. So Neota can be used in a really large number of languages. Neota comes with a tool called Translation Manager. So you can build in translations for, Japanese, Chinese, whole different alphabets, all of the European languages. You can build those versions of the application into Neota and manage them from the same place. So Neota really is built for global teams with, teams working in different jurisdictions around the world. Someone asked if there's a limit to the number of apps they can build. No, there is no limit. So you can build as many applications as you want. And you can deploy different numbers of applications, depending on your license, what license you have, you can deploy, X number of applications. But in terms of development, you can just, if you have Neota, build freely. We want you to build as much as possible to get as deep into the environment as possible, so you really understand the power of what's available to you. One more question there from someone, do you operate globally? They're based in the US? Yes, so Neota is actually a US headquartered organization. I work in the London office. We have an office in APAC as well, but we really are a global company built to serve global organizations, global customers. So we have support teams everywhere. We have customer success teams, technical teams in every jurisdiction, every region. So we have local support wherever organizations do need it. One more question here. Is Neota leveraging existing AI platforms such as IBM Watson? Great question. The answer is no. So Neota's AI sort of inference engine is entirely proprietary. So there's no Watson, there's no external connection to do the logic. The only time where you might connect a different AI tool is if you want to do something like machine learning text extraction. If you wanted to use a Kira type use case, or a Luminance type use case, then you can connect those. Neota has an API connector, and you can connect different tools up. It's a platform, so it's built for that kind of connection. You can do that very easily. But in terms of its internal inference engine, its internal logic making facility, it's entirely Neota's own technology. Last question here, I think, before I have to call it the end. Is it possible to package an app and share it with our Neota logic users? Yes, absolutely. So you can put skins around applications. You can embed them into intranet pages, for example. You can embed them. A lot of our customers do that, is they embed them into their own websites, put their own skin, look and feel over the top of it. But just the engine is working in the background. All that calculation, that logic is being done in Neota in the background, humming away. So you can absolutely do that, and you can share it publicly as well. You can use it, for, say, marketing or market awareness purposes. You can use it for revenue generation purposes. It really is completely up to you. If you have a license to Neota, you can either use it for internal purposes, or you can go to the market with it. We don't, it doesn't matter to Neota how you use it. You have a license, but then you can use Neota for whatever purposes you need to use it for. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you use Neota. So that was workflow and a few other bits as well. I appreciate ran slightly over time there, but I just wanted to make sure I packed absolutely everything in so you had the full set of information. The recording will be shared. If you want to use this information internally, the recording internally, just let me know. Just reach out to me at Aziz, A-Z-I-Z, at neotalogic.com. Okay, look, I'm going to stop there and I'm going to say thank you so much for joining me for the hour. It's been great to show you what we've been working on. It's the fruits of a lot of effort on our part, and we really, really hope that you enjoy using it. So have a great remainder of the afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are, and I look forward to catching up with you at some point in the future.